Oh,
Yeah, I can see.
okay, sweet. So my presentation is about compliance markets. Um, well, first I'll just introduce myself. So, hi everyone. I'm Noah. I am the CEO and co-founder of
Yeah, yeah,
AgraWatt.
yeah. Hello, hi. I wanna introduce you.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, hi. He's No, and he's from AgraWatt, and he's CEO of AgraWatt, and he's from Texas, United States. And today he's going to give his presentation on compliance markets in North America.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Javier, and thank you for the opportunity.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
Excited to speak at this because it's really a global event. Everybody's coming from all over the place. So hopefully I can share my perspective on what I'm seeing here in North America and how it pertains to the industry. Little bit of a little bit of background on me. About 2.5 years ago, I was developing biogas projects in North Carolina, particularly converting swine manure into biogas and then using that biogas to create bio-CNG for use in transportation. Um, while working there, I really became fascinated with the economics of biogas, especially with the ESG revolution and all the subsidies available. And that's why I spun off and created AgraWatt. AgraWatt is really focused on the economics associated with biogas production and helping biogas project developers capitalize on subsidies that are available. And so the biggest part of this, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people in the industry agree, are compliance markets. I know we have some biochar folks, so I want to dive into first, like the advantages of biofuel. I have a sidebar here. Is this cutting off my presentation? Can you guys see the whole screen?
Yeah, I can see the whole screen.
Okay, thank you. So just like to get to the basics of biofuels, the real advantage here is, as opposed to fossil fuels, instead of pulling carbon and energy out of the ground, like 1,000 feet out of the ground, instead of pulling geologic carbon into up to the surface and combusting it and releasing it into the atmosphere, by using biofuels, we're able to inject ourselves into what is a natural cycle. And so the difference between biogenic carbon is that it's essentially recycled carbon. So any carbon dioxide or any emissions from biofuel combustion essentially would have happened whether we combusted it or not. And so we have the potential to replace fossil fuels with biofuels. And I like to call biofuels essentially like carbon neutral hydrocarbons, because that really points to the two aspects of biofuels that are really important. One is they can replace everything we love about hydrocarbons and everything that serves function in our society today. But two, these are carbon neutral, and or they have the potential to be carbon neutral. They're theoretically carbon neutral. But the biggest problem with biofuels is high production costs. Everybody here in the industry knows that. It's no secret. And so when we look to the two biggest biofuels emerging in North America, renewable diesel and renewable natural gas, renewable diesel costs 2 times more than fossil diesel to produce. And renewable natural gas costs 3 times more than fossil natural gas to produce. And so this is a significant problem. And if you zoom out, it's the biggest problem that our industry faces, is high production costs. So there's a lot of people here working to bring that cost down. And that's amazing. Like, that's what we need to see, is like people working to make biofuel production more efficient and bring the cost down. But we also need to take advantage of subsidies so that more people are working on biofuel production. And so right now, biofuel production relies on subsidies. And that's really the focal point of this presentation, is focusing on the subsidies that are available. The biggest, so the question is, where do these subsidies come from? And the biggest thing here is compliance markets, obviously, is what this presentation is about. But to understand where these subsidies are coming from, we need to zoom out. We need to take a macro view of what's happening. Yeah, governments are implementing subsidies, but there's a reason governments are implementing subsidies. And so the reason why is because in 2015, people are familiar with the Paris Agreement. 194 countries agreed, hey, we're going to keep warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. And so this agreement was signed. All these countries agreed, we're going to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So now these countries got to actually keep to what they're saying. And so at each country level, we're seeing, hey, governments are implementing targets. So here in the United States, we have a target to cut emissions 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. It's pretty ambitious, but that's our target. And so who's responsible for us meeting that target? Well, the way our government works is government agencies are responsible for us meeting that target. And so these government agencies are responsible for implementing policies to reduce emissions. And these policies are regulatory programs designed to reduce emissions within different economic sectors, whether that be transportation, manufacturing, power generation. There are programs being implemented all across our economy to reduce emissions. And one increasingly popular aspect of these programs are compliance markets, which is just a market-based approach to decarbonization that's baked into these regulatory programs. And so this chain exists everywhere. And so as an industry, as we look to where subsidies going to come from, I truly believe, hey, compliance markets are where we're going to see a lot of subsidies and the biggest subsidies. And to further this point, I was just watching a YouTube video yesterday. And so this is a screenshot from that video. And it shows the value of, or the market cap for compliance markets versus voluntary markets. And yes, the voluntary market is growing exponentially fast, but the compliance market also is. And it already dwarfs the voluntary market. So here in the US, biogas project developers are not looking towards voluntary markets in the near term. They're looking at it, hey, I mean, some of them are locking up long-term offtakes with big corporates, but really most project developers are looking at compliance markets and the subsidies available as a result of compliance markets. And to further this point, governments are strengthening compliance markets. In the past 3 months, California has strengthened their targets, Oregon has strengthened their targets, and British Columbia have strengthened their targets. So these markets aren't going away, they're only becoming stronger. And so we need to understand how they work, where they are, and how to capitalize on these subsidies that are available. As to where they are, I'm going to take a geographic approach in the next slide, but relevant compliance markets to our industry, we want to look at sectors of the economy that cannot be electrified. Because when you look at biofuels, somebody brought this up earlier in the conference, is biofuels are competing with electricity. And electricity is a great competitor. I mean, if something can be electrified, it's going to be electrified. Electric motors are 3 times more efficient than internal combustion engines, right? Electricity is kind of this miracle source of power, but it has its downfalls, and that's whenever you want to move the energy with you. And there are other downfalls as well, but the main sector of the economy we want to look at is transportation. Yeah, personal transport is going to be electrified. We're not going to see biofuel powered motorcycles. We're not going to see biofuel powered Teslas, like that sort of vehicle, that personal transport vehicle. That's not going to be fueled by biofuel unless it's biogas derived electricity. But trucks, buses, ships, airplanes, these vehicles make up a huge aspect of transportation, a huge part of transportation, and there's no solution to electrify them. So biofuels are perfectly positioned and ready today to decarbonize these vehicles. Yes, there's hydrogen, but like I said, biofuels are ready today. Hydrogen is not quite ready yet. It suffers from the same sort of thing as electrification. And one thing I don't know as much about, to be honest, is heavy industry, but there are compliance markets emerging within heavy industry as well. Where these compliance markets lie, in North America, we're seeing them explode. So it started with the United States implementing a renewable fuel standard in 2005 at the federal level. In 2007, California implemented a low carbon fuel standard. Oregon shortly followed, implementing basically an identical program to California's, and same with British Columbia. And just 10 days ago, we had Washington implement a same low carbon fuel standard, and the entire nation of Canada is now online. So everywhere you see here in teal is where there's active regulation and an active compliance market. The big ones we want to look to, like the next ones to come online, New York just released their climate plan, which includes plans for a low carbon fuel standard. And there's also a lot of noise in Michigan for a low carbon fuel standard as well. How these compliance markets work, it borrows a lot from the Kyoto Protocol. Some of the ideas mentioned there have kind of funneled down to the local level. So essentially, fuels either create credits or deficits. So this is really geared towards transportation, because that's where the compliance markets exist that are relevant to our industry today. And so each year, the government sets a standard, which basically says, if you produce transportation fuels, you cannot emit more than X gram CO2 equivalent emissions per megajoule of fuel you produce. And so essentially, if you're above this standard, you're generating deficits. And if you're below this standard, you're generating credits. So oil giants are generating a ton of deficits, and they need to buy credits to comply with this standard. And so that metric that I mentioned, the gram CO2 equivalent emissions per megajoule, that's a measurement of how clean fuels are. So to put it really simply, dirty fuels generate deficits, clean fuels generate credits, and cleaner fuels generate more credits. And so the way we measure how clean a fuel is called its carbon intensity. And we come to a measure of its carbon intensity based on a life cycle assessment, which measures the emissions associated with producing a fuel and then using a fuel. And a little tool that we've made allows you to take, hey, what's the carbon intensity of your fuel? And then show you the subsidy you'd earn based on that. Basically, how many credits will you generate and how much will those credits be worth? Multiply those values, you come to the subsidy. And here you'll see why I'm giving this talk today, is because the subsidies are absolutely astronomical and ridiculous. And given the strength in targets, yeah, we expect the prices to go down because more supply is coming to market, but it's not going to just plummet as fast as we once expected, because these targets are being strengthened. So right now, if you're able to get bio CNG into California and for it to be used as a transportation fuel, the subsidy is around $60 per decatherm. If right now, that's even with the high cost of natural gas in the US, that's 10 times the price of natural gas at the wholesale level. So these subsidies are something you want to be taking advantage of. They're not something to ignore. In fact, they're a huge driver. They're the reason BP just invested $5 billion into Archaea Energy. They're the reason billions have gone into the biogas industry here in North America, is because these subsidies exist. So yeah, that's my presentation. A little bit about AgraWatt. Our mission is to speed up the transition from fossil to biogenic fuels and hard to decarbonize industry. There's no need to change consumer behavior. biofuels are ready to decarbonize today. Our mission is to help project developers get more projects online and speed up that transition. Products, I mentioned we have this calculator that'll show you the value of these subsidies in North America, both the implied value and the actual value you can see from these subsidies. And services, we offer solutions, both upstream markets in terms of gathering feedstocks, and then downstream markets with the specialty and transportation compliance markets. If you'd like to reach me, my email is noah@agrawatt.com, and I'll put my LinkedIn in there. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. So is there any questions on Noah's presentation? He presented very well about compliance markets. So it's a good deal for compliance and